Welcome to the deep dive. Ever feel like keeping your digital life secure is like trying to plug a million tiny holes in a dam?
Yeah, it definitely feels that way sometimes.
Well, today we're diving into vulnerability management, which is basically the strategy for finding those holes, figuring out which ones are the biggest deal, and patching them up before the digital flood hits.
Exactly.
We've pulled together a bunch of info here, covering everything from, high-tech scanning tools to whispers from the shadier parts of the internet.
Right.
And our goal today is just to unpack all this in a way that actually makes sense, even if you think firewall is just like a fancy room divider.
Think of us as your guides through this sometimes perplexing landscape. We'll explore how we actually uncover these weaknesses, understand why some are way more critical than others, and then, the important part, what we actually do about them.
All right, let's get started then. Finding these things first. The first thing that jumped out was vulnerability scans. Sounds like we're actively looking for trouble, right? What exactly does a scan do?
You got it. Vulnerability scans are like sending a digital detective through your computer systems, your networks, just poking around to see if anything looks, well, out of place or potentially dangerous. It's a systematic check for known weaknesses.
Okay, and the sources mentioned two types, non-credentialed and credentialed. What's the difference there? Credentialed sounds like you need a secret password or something.
Sort of. Think of a non-credentialed scan, like someone standing outside a building. They're looking at the doors, the windows. They can quickly see if a door's unlocked or maybe a ground floor window is broken. The really obvious stuff that anyone on the outside could potentially spot. It's fast, good for finding immediate risks right at the edge of your network.
Okay, so that's like checking my website's front door for obvious problems. What about the credentialed scan, then? Sounds like they get the keys to the building.
Pretty much, yeah. A credentialed scan is like giving that detective a master key. They get inside, they can wander around the whole building, they can open files, check software settings, look at internal systems, even check things like digital certificates. Because they have that deeper access, they can uncover way more subtle, potentially serious vulnerabilities that an outsider wouldn't even know exist. It gives you a much, much more accurate picture.
Okay. So the credentialed scan sees the messy stuff inside, like sensitive files in the wrong place or hidden bugs in the internal software.
Precisely. These scans are great at finding things like outdated software, think rusty pipes in your digital plumbing.
Right.
Or misconfigurations, known security flaws that already have fixes available. We call those missing patches and, well, lots more. And importantly, these scans often assign a score to each vulnerability using something called CVSS. That helps you figure out which leaky pipes need fixing first.
CVSS. Okay, we'll definitely come back to scoring, but first the sources also mentioned web application scanners. Are these just for, like, online shops and customer portals?
Exactly right. While the regular vulnerability scanners look broadly at your whole infrastructure, web application scanners are specialists. They focus just on things you interact with through a web browser, websites, online stores, login pages, that sort of thing.
Okay.
They're designed to actually mimic common web-based attacks, like trying to sneak malicious code into a contact form or exploiting weaknesses in how the site handles information. Things like SQL injection or cross-site scripting, XSS.
So it's like testing if someone can break into my online shop by, I don't know, messing with the add to cart button or something.
You nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, package monitoring. This sounds like we're keeping tabs on the tiny little building blocks of our software.
Yeah, the source mentioned software isn't just one big thing. It's built from smaller bits, libraries, plugins, things like that. So what's the deal with monitoring these packages?
Well, imagine your software is like a complex recipe made from lots of different ingredients. Those are the packages. Package monitoring is like constantly checking if any of those individual ingredients have been recalled because maybe they're contaminated or have a known flaw. We do this by comparing the versions of the components we're using against these huge databases of known vulnerabilities.
And the big one, the main database, is the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures List, or CVE.
Precisely. The CVE list, which is maintained by MIT, it's like the official global catalog of all publicly known cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Each one gets a unique ID, like CVE 2023-5752.
Right.
The 2023 tells you the year it was publicly recognized, and 5752 is just its unique number for that year. It's basically a common language, so security people everywhere can talk about the exact same problem. And you also mentioned the National Vulnerability Database, NVD. That's another really important resource, often provides more detail, building on that CVE list.
So if a new weakness is found in one of these software ingredients, it gets a CVE number, and then our package monitoring tools can warn us if we're using that specific ingredient.
Exactly that. It helps us quickly see if any of the foundational bits our software relies on have known issues that, need updates or maybe even swapping out for something else.
Makes perfect sense. All right, next on the list, threat feeds. This sounds like we're tuning into the cybersecurity grapevine or something. Where does this info come from?
Think of threat feeds as like real-time news tickers just for the cyber world. They're constantly updated streams of information about current threats, emerging threats.
Okay.
And they come from all sorts of places. Security companies, the ones making antivirus software, they often have their own feeds based on what they're seeing out there.
Yeah.
Government agencies are big contributors too. CISA in the US or the UK's National Cybersecurity Center, they put out feeds about significant threats that could affect lots of organizations. Their websites have details on these warning services.
So it's like getting alerts from the cyber police and the neighborhood watch all at once.
Exactly. And then you have OSINT, open source intelligence. These are feeds pulling info from public sources like online forums where hackers might chat, social media, even the dark web sometimes. Alien Vault OTX is a good example of a community feed in that space.
Okay.
And finally, there are commercial threat intelligence providers, companies whose whole business is collecting, analyzing, and then selling this threat data.
So these feeds give us the absolute latest intel, what attacks are happening now, who's being targeted, how to protect ourselves.
Precisely. They provide really crucial context. A feed might tell us, for example, that a specific vulnerability we found in our scan is being actively used by ransomware groups right now.
Wow.
And maybe even how they're exploiting it and what we can do to block it. It's like getting an early storm warning so you can, batten down the hatches before it hits.
Okay, you mentioned OSINT there as one source collecting public info. Where exactly are we digging for these digital clues?
Well, OSINT in this context means sifting through all sorts of publicly available stuff. Regular websites, sure, but also hacker forums where maybe attack methods get discussed, news articles on breaches, official government reports like from US CERT detailing new threats,
Right.
security researchers posting findings on blogs, even academic papers sometimes. It's like being a cybersecurity detective, piecing together these public fragments to get a bigger picture of what threats are out there.
Sounds like a digital Sherlock Holmes, yeah. Now, we also talk about third-party threat intelligence. How's that different from the OSINT stuff anyone can find?
Think of OSINT as the raw ingredients, freely available. Third-party threat intelligence often takes those ingredients and mixes them with more specialized, sometimes proprietary information. This comes from commercial vendors, big names like FireEye, Symantec, Recorded Future. These companies have dedicated teams actively hunting threats using sophisticated analysis, and they provide much deeper, curated feeds and reports. It also includes intelligence shared within specific trusted communities or by governments more formally. It's a more collective, often much more refined pool of knowledge. An organization might also generate its own proprietary threat intelligence internally.
So OSINT is like catching rainwater, and third-party intel is like getting filtered, purified water delivered to your door.
That's a great analogy, actually. Yeah. Now, within this third-party space, you often hear about STIX and TAXII. Heard of those?
Vaguely. STIX sounds structured.
It is. STIX stands for Structured Threat Information Expression. Think of it as a standardized language for describing cyber threats, what happened, who did it, what tools they used, their techniques.
Okay.
So everyone in the cybersecurity world can understand and share this info consistently, like a common blueprint. It defines the what of a cyber event, broken down into 18 different object types like attack patterns or indicators.
And Tech2, is that the delivery truck?
Pretty much. TAXII is the trusted automated exchange of indicator information. It's the secure automated delivery system for that STIX information. It's the protocol, the rules for how different tools and organizations can automatically share threat intel over the internet, usually over HTTPS, both developed by MITRE. TAXII defines the how it gets shared.
Okay, STIX is the blueprint. TAXII is the secure delivery method.
Yeah.
Got it. Now, the source also mentioned something called SHODAN, a search engine for internet-connected devices. That sounds a bit different.
SHODAN is definitely a special case. It doesn't search websites like Google. Instead, it scans the internet looking for devices that are connected. Things like webcams, routers, industrial control systems, printers, all sorts of Internet of Things stuff.
Wow. Eh?
It then indexes information about these devices, what ports are open, what software they're running, sometimes even known vulnerabilities linked to them. It's incredibly useful for understanding your own organization's external attack surface. What devices do you have facing the internet? And do they have obvious weaknesses? It's like seeing all the connected gadgets globally and checking their security posture.
That sounds slightly terrifying, but I see how it'd be vital for security teams to know what they look like from the outside. Okay, next up. Information sharing organizations, or ISOs. What are these, like a cyber support group?
Huh. That's not a bad way to think of it. ISOs are basically collaborative platforms, places where cybersecurity pros, government agencies, companies in a specific sector can all come together.
To do what?
To share threat intelligence, best practices, lessons learned from attacks. The core idea is simple. We're all stronger if we work together and share info about the threats we're seeing.
And what kind of info are they sharing in these cyber meetups? Gossip about hackers?
Well, sort of. They share things called indicators of compromise, or IOCs. These are like digital breadcrumbs left by attackers, malicious IP addresses they used, unique malware signatures, dodgy URLs they contacted.
Okay.
They also share tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs. This is about how attackers operate, their methods, tools, behaviors. The AMP-IRE, ATT, and CK framework is a huge catalog of these TTPs. It's a really key resource here.
Right, the ATT and CK framework. Heard of that.
And finally, ISOs often share details about past incidents, what happened, how it was handled, what others can learn.
So it's like a super focused neighborhood watch for cyber threats.
Yeah.
Sharing notes on suspicious activity and how the bad guys work. The source gave examples like the Cyber Threat Alliance and the Financial Services ISAC.
Yeah.
Different groups for different folks.
Exactly. Different ISOs have different focuses. The Cyber Threat Alliance, CTA, is global, mostly cybersecurity vendors sharing intel to improve everyone's defenses. Automated Indicator Sharing, AIS, is a U.S. government program for automated sharing between government and the private sector. First, the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams is worldwide, bringing incident response teams together to share best practices. And then you have ISAC's Information Sharing and Analysis Centers. These are sector-specific.
Ah, like for banks or hospitals?
Precisely.
Right.
FSISAC for finance, HISAC for healthcare, EISAC for electricity, many others. Their mission is helping organizations in their specific industry handle the threats most relevant to them. And there's also MSISAC, which is specifically for U.S. state, local, tribal, and territorial governments.
Makes sense to have dedicated groups for specific sectors. Smart. Now, the source also mentioned the dark web as a potential source of intelligence. That sounds shadowy.
It is. The dark web is a part of the internet not indexed by normal search engines, needs special software like Tor to access. It offers anonymity, which, while useful for privacy sometimes, also makes it a hub for illicit stuff. So security teams might monitor parts of the dark web to look for early warnings, maybe stolen data being sold, or chatter about new exploits being used before they become widely known. It's like trying to eavesdrop in a hidden digital back alley.
Definitely sounds like next-level threat hunting. Okay, shifting gears to something more hands-on. Penetration testing, or pen testing. I feel like I've heard this term. Is this where the good guys try to hack you?
Exactly. Pen testing is a proactive security test where ethical hackers, the good guys, simulate real-world attacks against your systems.
Yeah.
To find vulnerabilities and weaknesses that actual attackers could exploit, think of it like hiring a professional security consultant to try and break into your digital house to see where the locks are weak or if you left a window open. It's often required for compliance reasons, too.
Okay. And there are three types. Known, partially known, unknown environments. What's the difference?
It's about how much info the testers get beforehand. Known environment, or white box, means they get lots of details, network maps, system configs, maybe even source code. Right. Very targeted. Partially known, or gray box, they get some info, but not everything. Mimics maybe an insider threat or someone with limited knowledge.
Right.
And unknown, or black box, they start with zero prior knowledge, just like a real external attacker would.
So black box is the most realistic outside attack simulation, but white box might find deeper internal flaws faster.
You got it. Now, Related to this are responsible disclosure programs and bug bounty programs. This sounds like we're actually inviting people to find flaws.
Yes, exactly. These are proactive ways for organizations to find vulnerabilities by encouraging ethical hackers and researchers to report them.
How does that work?
Well, a responsible disclosure program is just a clear policy saying, here's how to tell us if you find a security issue. A bug bounty program goes a step further and offers rewards, usually money, for valid vulnerability reports.
So you pay people to hack you ethically?
Essentially, yes. It can be really cost-effective, especially for public-facing websites or apps, because you're tapping into a huge pool of talent and only paying for actual results found. Much cheaper than hiring a full pen test team sometimes for certain things.
It's like saying, hey, find a security hole, tell us properly, and we might give you a reward for helping us. Smart.
Definitely. Okay, last one in this findings section. System and process audits. This sounds less about tech flaws and more about how we do things.
Exactly. System and process audits look at how well an organization's operations, workflows, and security protocols are actually working. They evaluate effectiveness. Are we meeting security goals? Efficiency. Are we using resources well? Security. Are controls adequate? And compliance. Are we following the rules and regulations?
So not just if we have firewalls, but are they configured right, and are people following the procedures for using them?
Precisely. It's about having the right technical defenses and the right policies and making sure people actually follow them.
What does an audit actually involve?
Usually it starts with setting clear objectives. What are we checking? Then collecting data interviews, reviewing documents, observing processes. Then evaluating that data against standards or best practices. After that, a report with findings and recommendations. And crucially, follow-up to make sure those recommendations actually get done. These audits are vital for finding inefficiencies, ensuring compliance, and just generally strengthening security and quality.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of ways to find vulnerabilities. Now, once we have this potentially huge list of problems, what's next? That's where analysis comes in, right? Finding them isn't enough.
Absolutely critical next step. Vulnerability analysis is key, and the first part is just confirmation.
Meaning?
Well, just because a scanner says something is a vulnerability doesn't automatically mean it's a real exploitable problem. We need to weed out false positives where the scanner flags something incorrectly.
Ah, okay. Annoying, but probably manageable.
The bigger worry is false negatives, where a real vulnerability exists, but the scanner misses it entirely. That's dangerous. Ideally, every patch available should be detected by a good scan.
Right, so double-check the scanner's work to avoid chasing ghosts or missing real threats. Okay, once we confirm it's real, then prioritization.
Yeah.
We can't fix everything at once, I assume?
Exactly. You absolutely have to prioritize. You rank vulnerabilities based on potential impact, how bad could it be if exploited, and likelihood, how easy is it to exploit. This brings us back to the CVE list we mentioned, the catalog.
Yeah?
But for prioritizing, we heavily rely on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS. It's a standard way to score severity based on technical details, impact on confidentiality, integrity, availability, how easy it is to exploit, what access an attacker needs, things like that.
And CVSS gives a number score. The source mentioned ratings like critical, high, medium, low.
That's right. CVSS assigns a score, usually 0 to 10. 9.0 to 10.9 is high, 4.0 to 6.9 is medium, and 0.1 to 3.9 is low. This standard scoring helps organizations focus their limited time and resources on the biggest risks first.
Makes total sense. Tackle the burning fires before the smoldering embers. The source also mentioned vulnerability classification. Is that just different ways of labeling them?
Pretty much. It helps understand the nature of the threat. We might classify by source. Is it a bug in the software code itself? Or maybe a mistake in how the system is configured?
Okay.
Or we classify by potential impact. Could it lead to a data breach? Could it knock a system offline, a denial of service? Could it let an attacker take full control? Knowing the category helps decide how to fix it.
Right. Understanding where it is and what damage it could do. What about this exposure factor thing?
Exposure factor is an attempt to estimate the percentage of loss an organization might face if a specific vulnerability gets exploited successfully. It tries to put a potential financial or operational cost figure on ignoring a particular risk.
Trying to quantify the ouch. Now, environmental variables, this sounds like our own situation matters.
Hugely. Environmental variables are the specifics of your organization setup, your industry, regulations you have to follow, all that affects how critical a vulnerability is for now.
How so?
Okay, example. A vulnerability in an old, unsupported operating system, a legacy system. Maybe in a manufacturing company, that system controls critical factory machinery. That vulnerability is a massive priority for them, maybe way higher than the same flaw on a less critical system in a different company, especially if there are industry rules about securing those control systems.
So the same flaw can be a 5-alarm fire for one company and just a minor annoyance for another, depending on their context.
Precisely, which leads right into industry and organizational impact. Different organizations care most about protecting different things.
Like banks and money.
Exactly. Banks worry most about financial data. Hospitals, patient records, and keeping medical systems running. The analysis has to consider these potential impacts: financial loss, reputation damage, operational disruption, legal penalties.
It really comes down to knowing what's most valuable to you and what the worst-case scenario looks like if a vulnerability hits that asset.
Okay, last bit of analysis. Risk tolerance. How much risk are we willing to live with?
That's a good way to put it. Risk tolerance is the level of risk an organization decides it's willing to accept to achieve its goals. Some are very risk-averse, want to fix everything ASAP. Others might accept more risk due to costs, operational needs, or other business priorities. Vulnerability management has to align with that overall tolerance level.
Okay, so we found the weaknesses, analyzed how bad they are, considered our own situation. Now, finally, we do something. Vulnerability response and remediation. What are the main options here? Right, taking action. The most fundamental thing is patching. Regularly updating software, operating systems, firmware, applying those fixes vendors release for known vulnerabilities.
Just keep everything up to date.
It's crucial. Failing to patch promptly is honestly one of the biggest reasons systems get compromised. And a real headache is those legacy devices where the vendor just doesn't issue patches anymore. Big risk there.
Okay, patching first and foremost. What about insurance? That sounds like planning for failure.
Cybersecurity insurance is like a financial safety net. If an incident does happen, despite your best efforts, insurance can help cover costs, data breach recovery, business interruption, legal fees, things like that.
So it doesn't stop attacks, but helps with the cleanup cost.
Exactly. It's not a substitute for good security, but it's part of managing the overall risk. You really need to read the policy details, though. Understand what's covered and what's not.
Makes sense. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Okay, segmentation. Building internal walls in our network.
That's the idea. Network segmentation means dividing your network into smaller, isolated zones. If an attacker breaks into one segment, it's much harder for them to move sideways into other parts of the network.
Contain the damage. Smart.
Especially important if you handle sensitive data. It limits the blast radius of a breach.
What are compensating controls? Sounds like a temporary fix.
They often are. Compensating controls are alternative security measures you put in place when you can't apply the ideal fix right away, like maybe you can't patch a critical server immediately because it would disrupt operations.
So what do you do instead?
You might implement stricter access rules for that server, turn on extra monitoring for suspicious activity, maybe put a web application, a firewall in front of it, things to reduce the risk until you can apply the proper patch. They're usually temporary bridges, not permanent solutions.
Okay, like putting extra locks on a weak door until the carpenter can fix the frame. And lastly, exceptions and exemptions. Sometimes we just don't fix things.
Well, hopefully not lightly. But yes, sometimes for legitimate business or technical reasons, fixing a vulnerability immediately just isn't feasible. In those cases, an organization might formally grant an exception.
But they can't just ignore it.
Absolutely not. It must be documented, accompanied by a thorough risk assessment. What happens if this gets exploited? And details of any compensating controls being used. It's a conscious, documented decision based on risk, not just sweeping it under the rug.
Right. Okay, so we found the holes, analyzed them, fixed them, or put controls in place.
Yeah.
But how do we know we actually fixed it? That seems important. Validation of remediation.
Absolutely critical. You need to confirm your fixes worked. The most direct way is rescanning.
Run the same scans again?
Exactly. After you apply patches or make changes, run the vulnerability scanners again. Did the vulnerability disappear from the report? That confirms your fix was effective. It can also sometimes catch new issues, maybe introduced by the fix itself. Plus, it provides documented proof of remediation, which is often needed for compliance.
So checking if the faucet stopped dripping after we tightened it. Makes sense. What about audit in this context?
An audit here is a more in-depth review of the entire remediation process. Could be internal auditors, could be third-party assessors. They look at documentation change logs, patch records, incident reports if something happened.
Mm-hmm.
They also check if the organization actually followed its own policies and procedures for handling vulnerabilities. It's about ensuring the whole system for fixing things is sound, not just that one specific fix worked.
Okay, so audit is like quality control on the whole repair process. Then there's verification. How's that different from rescanning?
Verification is more about ongoing vigilance, making sure vulnerabilities don't reappear later.
How would they reappear?
Maybe a system change reintroduces an old problem, or maybe a new threat emerges that exploits something previously thought harmless. Verification involves continuous monitoring, regular scheduled assessments, not just after a fix, and having adaptive responses ready for new issues. It's about maintaining security over the long haul, not just a one-time check.
Got it. Rescanning confirms the immediate fix. Verification is the long-term lookout to make sure it stays fixed and nothing new crops up. Okay, last piece. Reporting. Who needs to know about all this vulnerability stuff?
Management does. Leadership needs regular updates on the organization's vulnerability landscape to make informed decisions about strategy, about resources, about budget.
What goes in these reports?
Typically an overview. Total number of vulnerabilities, severity trends over time, definitely highlighting the critical and high CVSS scores that need urgent attention, progress on fixing things, how are we doing on remediation, metrics showing how risk is actually being reduced by these efforts, and clear recommendations where do we need to allocate more resources maybe.
So it's like a security health report for the bosses,
Right.
helping them understand the risks and decide where to invest in prevention or treatment.
Exactly. It provides that essential visibility for effective risk management and deciding where the money and effort should go.
Wow, okay. We really did cover a lot there. So vulnerability management is really this continuous cycle, isn't it? Find the weaknesses, understand the risk, fix them, check the fix, and keep checking. Definitely more involved than just running a virus scan now and then.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing loop. Identification, analysis, response, and validation. It's fundamental for any kind of strong security posture today, especially with how fast threats evolve. Understanding these concepts is vital, really, for any organization, even individuals trying to stay safe online.
So as we wrap up, it makes you think, with new threats popping up constantly, how can we individuals, companies, be more proactive about managing our own digital weak spots? Maybe something for you listening to consider. Which part of this whole cycle, the scanning, the analysis, the patching, the checking, which part resonates most with you and why? Definitely food for thought. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.